I'll be reading from my first book, Building in Deeper Water, edited by Robert Bly and published by the Thousands Press in 2003. This book is in three parts. Part 1, the first poem, Still Stalking the Fawn. At this vulture perch over the river, a tiny oak has begun in humus, and already its small roots search into the cracks of the limestone bluff. I'm leaning against an old oak beside a high meadow, still stalking the fawn of my desire, so that I might touch her fading spots. Walking after breakfast. Sometimes, between the cardinal's first whistle and the bee's morning hum, a man hears the answer to a question he forgot to ask. The wet trunks of cedar trees cross before me, like a bird's giant footprint. Those lines are the map I saw in the old branch library, where as a boy I read of herons and swans and great geese going north. Whistling and humming at the same time creates a third thing between my teeth, and I become a cricket singing of spruce trees and nearby flies. I taste both a cigar and coffee, and the question is, how do I get on in life? Having flown. Having flown in dreams last night, playfully, with the artistry of a swallow through twilight, I took up the saw this morning and dropped the few trees where the planned road will run. Below the hill's crown, and above the wet, willowy rut, I piled brush for a squirrel cave and a refuge for a ruffed grouse. From a mossy compost, I removed some old logs, fitted now with fungus, and I threw them on the mound to dry. When I threw one slippery log, it knocked my head. I guess a bit of sleep remained in the log and me. It wanted to remain in the must, and I wanted to leave. Sledgehammer. Once in a while, someone else guides my sledgehammer. It happens when the air is chilled and quiet, my arms weary, my trunk a warm sea of sweat, and I forget I am of any world. Into my emptiness he arrives. The arc of the steel head draws true, and the wedge drives through the icy wood, which stops the tip just as it touches the earth. The log splits so perfectly, I can only marvel at the beauty the firewood angel brings. I'm excited and happy, but on the next log, I drive the wedge 6 inches into the ground. After confession. On a Saturday evening, I returned from confession with a heart as clean as I could know. I crossed the park and headed home and saw through a lighted window a naked girl, older than I, emerging from her bath. Shame, as cold as April nights, fell onto my shoulders. I so wanted to watch. Had she turned off her light, she could have seen me. I would not have hid, nor been able, for my awkward soul and quaking legs fastened me to the concrete. In a moment of habit and modesty, she drew the shade and broke the spell. I never learned her given name, though I know her by one I chose. So if you know her, tell her I, too, love her, and I call to her by that name whenever I walk into the dark or in the quiet light of autumn. A black pig's head. Down the snowy, deep creek road, I walk at ease, past the limestone outcroppings, the nettling white pines, and a hedge of cast-off wire spools. Then in a ditch, crows on a black pig's head pick at the eyes and cheeks, the lips, the tongue, and the neck bone. Tracks in the snow show a coyote sniffed the fat and the bristle and left. Vultures will come, as will the sun and hawks and dogs and mold. When the weather turns, there will be worms, but for now, ice delays the rotting. Somewhere nearby in town, or at a farmhouse, pork is in the freezer. It's always this way, I know. The living kill to live, or eat the dead, and these deeds go on, like the creek over stones to the sea. In an old armchair. In an old armchair I sit, drinking coffee and warming my feet before the open cast-iron stove. Over the chimney, a heavy wind suddenly pulls the fire into a roaring, hollow-filling horn blast. My fears, the old childish and primal fears, are sucked to the stove door, called by a bird-faced one who demands my attention. I lean toward the blaze, and the heat peels something from my face. Maybe another fear that feeds the bird-faced one, who rides the dark wind to the next fire. Autumn wind. When the wind turns, it creates a hole around which leaves whirl. The current pulls from nothing. In a nail hole in the shed siding, a whistle begins. As if the wind and wood understood, they were just passing the cemetery. I can't see what makes the whistle, though I know the sound comes alive because of what it's missing. So I blow on my hands and over my thumbs to whoo, a beautiful whoo like an owl. When hunters rise. When hunters rise in the darkest hour, every movement is a ceremony and relevant. Stoke the bank coals, eat a simple breakfast, gather rifles and sleep-scattered wits, step outside and breathe the cold air. Let rituals warm the soul like long johns. So few know this hour as well as hunters. Maybe monks, surely a prayerful shaman. The hour before dawn, when someone unnamed walks the hospitals, the hotels, and highway. Even the criminal has finished his crimes for the night, frightened by the greatest stalker. But the hunter goes out with darkness in his weapon rather than holding its stone in his heart. He understands the fundament of life. Something dies so another can live. We know this because when the night goes to day, the sun kills the stars in the sky. A grouse died in a fox's mouth. Last night while I slept, a grouse died in a fox's mouth on a snowy bridge. This morning, bloodied brown feathers scatter toward the hills. Silence absorbed the bird's last terrors, the way the snow holds tracks that come and go. I step into that silence, where the grouse's screams hang with a ripping feather coat, where the fox's shadowy head shakes hollow bird bones that snap between her teeth as a broody skull is crushed. I see the fox track wind over the hill to a den where kits are curled, waiting for her raw red nipples to feed them again. Two dogs bark in faraway trees. Two dogs bark in faraway trees. Maybe the same woods where the old trapper came upon a glowing oak, burning from the inside without flames, too hot to approach, and more orange than the sun which was setting. When he returned a week later, the blackened bark felt warm. The inner fire still burned, and he saw that in the woods, nothing else had changed. When I prowl the woods, I wonder, is this the dead tree that burned up inside? Or is it that one above the rocks? Or the one down in the gully? I love the single deer path. I love the single deer path, winding into wet, tangly night woods, where nocturnal squirrels and whippoorwills usually fly tree to tree. The hunter walks from the known to the not known, and water drops from leaf to leaf. The humus grows moist, still, and womanly. Beautiful stars. What makes the stars so beautiful? Their brilliant, godlike fires? At noon, constellations glow, yet can't be seen from here. In a cave, darkness is darkness. Yet when stars appear in darkness, people see archers or dragons or souls who ride wild horses down the Milky Way. Wild plum. Maybe you pick a wild plum from a wobbly ladder. Go in between the thorns, part them for the fruit. Then come down the ladder before you taste the sweet meat and spit out the seed. When all the plums are in, you can cook the flesh for jam and dry the pits for a rattle. But you will still have to live with the thorns. Beavers too young. Beavers who were too young built a lodge in the wrong place, in the deep trees, under the forest spread, and much too near the highway. The two of them cut the saplings properly and wove a tight dome in high water. Inside the dome, 3 tunnels curled up to the high dens where they matted grass for their comfort. Then the flood receded. They built again, further out, among the cattails in deeper water. They built again, branch by branch, a new lodge and home. This is the way to live. Dive into the swamp. Emerge with a sweet root. Then sit like a beaver and enjoy your life, having built in deeper water. Part 2. Puma under a Mayan blanket. I hear the purr of a great cat, my wife under a Mayan blanket. Your long, lithe body smells of water and licked, clean hair. The path of the puma crosses over you. As I draw near, you retreat slightly into a stance of assurance, and you allow your hesitation to manipulate my stalk. Your smallish pap sways back and forth into a beam of moonlight. When stroked, your strong hips undulate, both bone and flesh, at the crossroads of the animal ways. The slack bag of your stomach swings contrarily to your tailbone. Then the fragrance of your great inland sea fills the breeze in my soul. Where the territories of two hunters overlap, whether at mount or ravine, along snake trails or at a cave mouth, our hearts meet in the vast terrain of a place only the sun, the moon, and we can be. Stripping elderberries. This afternoon beneath a shade tree, I stripped elderberries lazily until my thumb turned purple and funny. Now my wife, in a prickly mood, stirs the black kettle, bubbling with jam and 1,000 seeds to catch in my teeth. A wooden cutout of an old woman's backside. In Eden, Minnesota, where County Road 16 slithers through the corn rows, a painted image gives new homage to the mysterious power of Mother. In a garden beside the house, a rump stands bent near the lilies. It's a cutout of wood, an irreverent wink from Granny's wild-ass nature. This new country ritual shuns the bathtub Madonna for an elderly arse in the berries. My wife loading her cattle. Before 5 a.m. in late November, she stepped into the deep mouth of the trailer and sweetly called to her cattle, "Come on, boys, look what I have for you." Sniffing the metal and blackness before them, twin steers backed away from her beckon. I squeezed the stall gate against the smaller one's ribs till he jumped toward her voice and went in. "Good boy, good boy." The second steer turned and kicked on the pivot, his brown bulk confused by her words. He resisted the driver's twist of his tail, but finally had to jump into darkness. "It's okay, baby." And his mother offered him corn. The floor trembled. The trailer door slammed. Something rumbled in the muscles and meat. My wife wept as her cattle boys left to the Watkins locker in Plum City. She said nothing more, and neither did I. Then we both drove off to work. In the middle of an argument. Sometimes, in the middle of an argument, A door flies open. Lightning flashes, and steely needles of rain begin to fall. You feel as if you're in an open field, unable to find a cave or a ditch. Here on the bluffs, where a log house can be leveled by straight line winds, we've had practice dealing with storms. If a hard wind gets inside, the walls can fall, the roof rise and tumble, and the debris piles on top of the basement of fear and loneliness. If I have to carry a plywood sheet to nail over a broken window, I carry it knife-like into the wind. I walk sideways so the force won't throw me. As I pull the door against the wind, it resists even more. Then, at the instant when the door is edgewise and I'm backing into the house, I must take special care. Make sure my fingers won't get slammed to the jam wood or the glass shatter over me. I must resist the wind just a bit, push against it, and yield slowly so we close the door together. After the battle. After the battle, after living in grief, you smile at me, as sweetly as flames from riven oak wood. Your love, withheld for so long, releases to warm me with the scent and fire of your hidden years. From knots and gnarled heartwood, the fire burns hot and slow, just as grief derives from struggling, and compassion is born from grief. The face of holiness returns with you after the battle and the grief. The blizzard. At home, we sit out the blizzard and wait 2 days until the roads clear. Between chores, we speak of the neighbors' infidelities, incomplete defections, and how humans cannot humanly fill all the needs of another. We hold hands and scour one another's expectations. What else can we do except carry silences behind hard lips with lines like snow fences, and let our small wants accumulate on top of one another, the way drifts always pile up on the other side of the fence? Tonight, the moon shines over the wind-washed fields. Tufts of unmown hay lift through the rippling whiteness, like the body hairs we fondle after our boy goes to sleep, like the holy promises we remember when we pray. Not naked on the bed. Your beauty, not naked on the bed, is far more a gift than I ever expected. I watch languor recline in your wise gray eyes, while slate hummingbirds, carved as earrings, dangle from golden hooks. I quiver in your breath, and the ceiling fan halts in that instant. We look at one another with both eyes open and close. An intimate wind, the cause of auroras, moves north and south, east and west. Then we swim into one another. Into my quilts. Just as a bear goes down to its hole, in winter I descend into my quilts. My wife's arm warms my pillow, and the room is black and comfortable this way. Wrapped and curled, I'm a different being with residual feelings from the day. The warmth takes hold of the irritations, chattered gratitudes, telephone static, gasoline pump sounds, and the radial tire whines, then melts them, burns them away, like a cedar log snapping in the fire. As I crawl deeper into my hole, her warmth spreads through mine, and our two bodies, huddling like slumbering badgers, invite a mysterious third thing into the welcoming dark. In a harsh time, and one always comes, fire explodes from tinder and lightning, although neither looks like a flame. From ashes and soil grow brilliant flower heads, and their perfumes waft unseen. I don't know if my toe dreams differently than my wife's ear, or if our fingernails dream at all. Yet something inside us knows. My wife breathes the same sleep rhythm as I. No one else ever matched that rhythm. It can't be an accident we sleep together. Perhaps someone mysterious waits inside our sleep, and when we're asleep, we're really awake. The holy ones tell us such a being is there. The meditator in love. Without your face, I would look into the valley and throw myself in, like salt into sugar water, or smoke into fog. And my life would end without rapture, and the coyotes would chew my bones to splinters and lick out my bloody marrow. Without you, even my afterlife would end miserably. The Mystery Cave at Forestville. Women whose breasts I wish to nuzzle and hips I yearn to lick still sing into my sexual ear. The faintest remainder of plum blossom scent draws me toward the crevices of the smoothest danger. It takes either great trust or foolhardy ignorance to crawl into a cave which narrows, as if it were Lascaux with primal images, or the Mystery Cave at Forestville, or to walk away, aching and relieved, upright or crouched, on a path through thorns and berries. Either way, one must be prepared to get stuck and fail and praise and delight. Holy men may give contradictory words. Holy women, too, stand on either shore. But the blessing is not in the choice one makes, but in the constant movement in your heart. Needin' time. Come, sit in the cave behind my heart. Without you, I'm empty. Return once more, if only for a moment. We've not conversed enough, and I miss your precious, silent presence. Part 3. Inheritance. After I sledged the loosened stones from the barn's crumbling foundation, I had a hole, backfill rubble, and house jacks cranked to the plate. The wall hung like a hippo on tiptoe as I repoured footings below the frost line. When the concrete cures, although I'm a novice, I'll mortar the blocks like a mason. And as I carry those blocks to stack by the barn, 2 by 2 by 2, my stiffening gait and weary arms bend me toward the ground of my being. Although he's napping on days like this, I see my father in a window reflection, beside me, walking in a hat like mine, and wearing my beard and mustache. What we wanted. I wanted my son to know a hillside's green lap, a darting goshawk, the way pheasants bark, and how your life grows wider than your dream. My wife wanted to tend, again, a vegetable bed, milk alpine goats, gather brown eggs, then raise and ride her many spirited horses. Secretly, I wanted to live as my grandfather did. Before he left the prairie to marry a city girl in St. Paul, where he lost so many good jobs. Eventually, because he rolled his own cigarettes, because he drank port and muscatel, because he had blood clots and gangrene, his riding legs were amputated. From our farm now, I hear unfed cattle bellow in our neighbor's stock pen, and I see thunderstorms approaching from the west long before I want to. The Strawberry Special. In the eastern night, one cloud is white, like the back of my grandmother's head, her hair thin, her face averted, waiting for the dawn far away. By her kitchen table, Grandma sat in the city, watching trains pull loads from the east. Our house shook through her great silence until the cars were west and the earth still. She'd tell the story of the Strawberry Special, the rail spur she rode once in Dakota. How she had to wait all night on the platform at the station because the train couldn't make the incline. An army of worms covered the tracks as writhing ribbons of grease. At dawn beside her, a dark tarpaulin shivered, and a family of Sioux came out of their sleep. When they continued, the caterpillars gone, each leaf and grass blade had been devoured. The Strawberry Special took her to her cousin and his pal, a cowboy with a buggy. As an old woman she thrilled when her grandchildren squirmed at this squeamish tale of her courtship. 40 years later, I occasionally dream a locomotive is driving through my sleep. The floors tremble, cattle cars shake, power poles sway like bare saplings. Then the worms in the wall start to crawl through the cracks, yet I awaken to a butterfly sunshine. Why some women discard rattlesnake skins. Number 1. A young man mailed rattlesnake skins from Dakota's razory grasses. These make great hatbands, he wrote to his sweetheart in the East in St. Paul. And no man should be without one. She, a milliner, discarded them, for she made women's hats with great white plumes from the Everglades egret and silk flowers of brightly turned cloth, which were sewn beside beads like sour small berries. Finally, the lace, like the wings of fairies, could mask the hard eyes of the women. 2. Around the fire, the old man danced in a circle with a blanket over his chilled, bony shoulders. The holy muscatel heating his belly. His story slept in his heart. Under spiraling sparks in his grandson's gaze, a snake rose through the vines of blood. As Grandma dealt solitaire on her table at the window, her head stringy white with psoriasis, Gramps got stoned after seeing her glare, then whispered before slumping on the ground. My great-granny was an Indian, and so are you. Then he slept in his blanket by the fire. Number 3. I was awakened on a fur-lined blanket by the sound of a cat on the glossy wood floor in the apartment of a truck driving woman. How wonderful, she told me, as I lay sultry and blurred. You trusted me enough to sleep before me. So, sleep in my bed as long as you like. When I was 20, Grandpa leaned on his red hoe handle. Beside the zinnias, I saw his muscatel, and I thought, damn, he'll play his harmonica all night, and I have to study John Kenneth Galbraith. The thread of sunlight. Where the thread of sunlight crossed the top bunk, I touched the rough-cut rafter and watched 2 spiders approach on the lumber's vertical plane. Just when my heart condensed to arachnid size, the great wounds of war opened before me. One spider limped on, with the other's head in its mouth. When I asked my mother about war, she told me, "You're thinking too much." And, before her sentence ended, my father rushed in, chattering about the chores we'd accomplish. The magneto for the mill saw needed repair. The window trim should be painted. The outboard motors could be tuned. And if the work gets done, we might go fishing in the evening. The sunlight reflected off the flat lake, and I stood between my mother and my father, thinking. Catching up to the words. If they had learned a melody once, my uncles and father remembered it at a party, then galloped into song one voice at a time, catching up to the words. And after my brother John's wake, they drank a little in the living room with Uncle Jim's uninvited, blubbering pal. I didn't know him. I was 19 and angry and paced between the sink and the stove as the drunk babbled on and on and on. Then Dad, then his brothers, came into the kitchen to talk and get away from misery one by one. Small duties. Some days my face relaxes as if my grandpa's skin folds over my cheekbones. Animals don't smile with their faces, and neither did Grandpa. Today, I have small duties ahead. Find a hummingbird feeder. Drive Daniel to a concert. Phone my godson and ask how he's doing. One dark peony is almost open, and an old corn cob, as dry as rattlesnake tail, rests on the stoop in the sun. The columbines droop, and a hummingbird waits on the wire, and the old white oak tells me a smile is not required. From my chair, I don't remember what dreaming I did last night, yet today I'm quiet inside. A split oak log burns away in the stove, and a hard snow, like the rude world, blows past my window. My feet are warm, and only my thoughts roam, like boys to a party, where my dad and uncles sing Stephen Foster songs in harmony, while they conjure a beautiful dreamer, so contrary to their meat saws and power drills, forklifts and card party chatter. A longing for quiet hides in their sentimentality. Nothing ever frightened them more than silence. I too know that fear well, yet because they found harmonious moments in a woodshop, at mass, or fishing at dawn, I can sit alone, alert and quiet, while my own boys run free in the world. At Mesa Verde, on my lap, in a white sleeping bag, Jess hears a high jet in the hollow night sky. Like a prophet pointing to heaven, he looks first to me, then bends back his face and sees the storm of the stars. I watch the moon rise, and the campfire leaps in his eyes as he sticks out his tongue to catch a star drop that falls through the incense of pinyon and sage. The crickets. On waking in the darkness, I thought my ears were ringing from high blood pressure I might have inherited. Then I thought maybe it was a message from Grandma, who, at 94, is trying to die. Our world will resonate when she dies, the way the earth does when a fault line releases its strain. Slowly, I recognized one cricket, then another, and others. It's as if something sent them ahead to warn us with their sound. A chill is coming, and a silence much deeper than the night. We collect gull feathers. As the evening dies over Pepin, we collect gull feathers, black and white ones, and pretend they were dropped by the eagle, whose track and wing marked the gray Mississippi sandbar. Jess remarked as we arrived, "If I point at hawks, they fly away. But if I don't, they stay in their trees." The river moves heavily south, and the sun drops beyond the bluffs. The air chills me. I want to keep my fingers in my pocket, because everything moves on here, except that sweet pain of love that knows he's growing up to leave me. Prayer cards in a drawer. Near the power plant, eagles hang like despair on the lip of river ice. They eat the dead fish that lift into open water. The winds have turned to warn the trees. A blizzard's coming. The coldest days will follow. Christmas approaches, and my mother's mother prays to die because she can no longer eat. Her mouth fills with purple sores, and phlegm continues to rise in her throat. She now keeps her teeth in a drawer, behind her prayer cards and courage, and still death won't take her. As I walk the town road in this, the darkest week, hope hides in my deepest pocket. I have trouble trying to pull it out into December's low light. Weeping for my nephew, even the moon's a red eye. During the last hour, the full moon grew smaller, chewed by our shadow. I've returned to my doorstep after walking the pasture and the snowfields. On my snowshoe track, snow salmon swim up the small drifts and ripples toward home. Tonight the moon is a red eye, dying in a river of stars. I've worked to a sweat, and with each breath I've prayed for my nephew who fell from a ladder and into a coma. What light can guide him as he wanders the ocean inside himself? This old moon is dying in its birth stream, as when a king, a coho, or humpback struggle to get back home. And I watch the moon in tears, sleepless and melancholy. First lessons. Spring blooms on warm Saturdays. 12 years old and learning the legal manner of shooting. Prone position. 22 rifle. Ping, ping, ping. A perfect shot with a perfect understanding of the laws. He'll get his state certificate to hunt. Autumn dries the soul, the woods and the leaves, which descend at their own time. They drop away and heap in the wind against a fallen, softened log. Its oak rot stinks with sour, babyish wetness. A gray squirrel scatters, chatters, then halts, spreading upward on the grand river of bark. Its tail is as still as the grain in wood. He shoots. The squirrel falls to the earth, twitching, until he wrings its neck as his father showed him. While skinning the animal, he prefers the fur to the pinkish carcass, doesn't like the wild smell, but he learns, touches the pearly gray guts, the knee socket shaped like a flower, and the deep red stains beneath the ribs. Song in praise of my uncle's death. God invaded his lungs with a vengeance, so he prayed, "This is too big for me, God. You take it." And God, the diamond back, slid into the prairie dog holes to feast. And God, the red-tailed hawk, swooped with her talons of ice and punctured the slow gopher's skull while it sniffed too far afield. And God, the ravenous pike, darted through quivering reeds and snatched the black crappie whose dorsal fin fought the mouth of teeth and failed. And God, the snake-tailed rat, crept through the sewer with her eyes downturned for a future use. His daughter asked, "Dad, are you still with us?" And God, the visible mist, smothered the landscape and ruined the picnic for the local clan. And God, the swift river, embraced the toddler who reached a crystal bridge at the spring thaw. And the daughter asked a second time, "Dad, are you still with us?" And God, the slippery hand, invaded his lungs with a vengeance, so he prayed, God, you take it. This is too big for me.